All right, this week I thought I would talk about the deception or the temptation or the care needed when we are looking at modern so-called knowledge, and particularly things like scientific knowledge, the theories of man in what he understands of the universe, how he interprets the information we see. And I think we need to be very careful with this. The reason being is that without saying how good or bad or right or wrong any of the information actually is, there are a couple of issues that of which we need to be careful. One, we don't always know from the source of this information. As Christians, some of these ideas and things could have sources from evil powers, so we say, from demonic knowledge. And so we've got to be a little careful that the so-called scientific knowledge isn't inspired by the evil one as a sort of deception for us. So we must be careful of this. And the other one is that the knowledge of men is in itself always limited, weak, and changing. Even though they might claim with great boldness as this is true or that is true, it's always open to interpretation or understanding. So the main point is that we've got to be very careful not to take this knowledge as the guaranteed truth of things. And in particular, we must not take this knowledge as being better than that revealed to us in the Holy Scriptures by the Holy Fathers, etc. We need to follow the knowledge revealed to us as from God, who obviously knows all things and knows all things exactly, who is the creator of all things and sustains all things. So we must keep our priority with this. Now, there might be times where some of the knowledge we receive from the Fathers seems a little difficult to reconcile with the experiences or the evidence, etc., of the world. And yes, that may be so. But we should be very careful just to say, oh, the knowledge of the Scriptures, the knowledge of the church is just silly fantasy or things like that. Well, what are we saying? This is from God, who knows all things. We must remember the source of this knowledge. And modern people like to put it away as like created little fantasies and stuff like this. But we must be careful. This is from God, and for one reason. Now, does that mean that a simplistic interpretation of the Scriptures is the way we go? Maybe not. It may be more complex, more nuanced than we think. But nevertheless, we must put it as first. And that whatever ideas of our history or past or knowledge we have should be subordinated to this, should be made consistent with, understood as consistent. So just as a warning, because I think a lot of people sometimes get caught up in scientific ideas and stuff, or social theories and things, and start thinking this is true and this is the way humans should behave and this is the way and this is actually leads us to an evil path, a way of destruction. And often it proves to be false. It is not actually as true as they say it is. So let us be very careful to not get deluded by the professor of this or the scientist of this or the scientist, all these ideas, because quite often they prove to be not so true. And even if they are correct on some of their observations, even what is true, overall, and actually most of it will fit Christianity, but let us also be careful that we do not become caught up with this secular philosophy, secular ideas and stuff, because these are of the world, and our thoughts should be on things of the heavenly ideas, the heavenly revelation, now the theology of the church. So this should be our priority. And if we get too caught up in the world, we start thinking in the world, thinking in worldly ways, keeping our focus on the world. Does that mean we shouldn't be engaged with science and etc.? Yeah, we can be. but we must be careful not to get absorbed in it as a thing in itself, as an end. Like in all things in the world. Yes, we have jobs, we work, we eat, etc. But we don't get absorbed and caught up with food as an end in itself. We don't get caught up with our careers as an end in itself. We don't even get caught up with our families as an end in itself. All things we must put God first. We must look for God first, trust in God. And as Christians, we must always affirm that God is creator. He is the creator of the world. We never move to a scientific theory which denies him as creator and also sustainer of the world. This is his creation. We are created in his image. And so exactly the mechanisms used, exactly the process, well, he's revealed so much in the scriptures, but we don't know everything. So we keep a certain open mind. We don't have to be simplistically rigorous on certain stereotypes of Christian opinion. But at the same time, let us not put the secular opinion, the secular stories, the secular interpretation of the evidence which we find above that of the scriptures, above that of our faith. This can be very dangerous. And as I said, we don't know. The secular interpretation might be inspired by thoughts of the evil one. They might be just fantasies in themselves, and evidence later will show them to be wrong. And quite often, new studies come and undermine the theories. So let us be sure that even if they are mocked a little bit for holding the Christian thing, let us put that first. Let us keep a sort of open mind in the sense that maybe there is an interpretation or understanding of the Christian revelation which is more nuanced, more subtle and stuff, which we need to take. It fits well with the evidence we see in the world. But let's, as I said, prioritize this and let's put a trust in this. And most importantly, let us not sort of get caught up in trusting science and technologies and all these things. We can get caught up with our phones and stuff, and they can be a distraction. We can say, wow, let's go to the moon and Mars and all this. Be careful, be careful, be careful. We are not created to fill the planets, the universe at this stage. We are created to become with God. Now, in the age to come, we probably will fill the universe. We'll be able to know all these things. So let us keep in patience our desire for the technology and stuff, because often these technologies move our mind away from God and move us away from our purpose. So as I think I've said another thing, as when you look at the sons of Cain, after he separated from Adam, separated from the holy line, he was outcast from the church. It's his sons that become the inventors of technology, of musical instruments, of tents, of economy and all these things, of these secular things. You know, these are the ones who've cut off from the sons of God. They're cut off from the line of Adam and through Seth. These are the men of the world. And so the technology is tied up with human thinking, human ways. And in the Tower of Babel, man was who was technology, building this tower, trying to reach heaven according to his technology. And God cursed us. He split and divided man because of this. So let us be very careful to start becoming worshippers of technology, thinking that technology can save our lives or looking to it to make my life longer or healthy. What are we doing here? What is our purpose? What is our life? Our life is the age to come. The life is of Christ. How do we get to the life of Christ? Through the practice of the virtues, through prayer, through coming to church, through our faith in Him. This is how we get eternal life. This is how we get eternal. And when we are united with Christ, we become almost in a sense infinite, omnipresent with God, as far as we can be of all more things than anything possible technology. We know more things. We have the infinite knowledge of God to participate in. What is it that we need to run around spaceships around the this is from rock to rock. This is a meaningless pursuit in the big picture of things. So let us be careful not to be caught up with these things. Let us be careful not to be deluded by the authority of the philosophers and the great physicists, etc. Now, it's not to say that their discoveries are wrong or anything, or all deluded. No, some of them are good, some of them are useful, but the mentality is just the authority we give place in them, to be very careful of this. that we do not sort of rush after them and oh, well, let's change the scriptures, this interpretation of the faith from the fathers, let's just conform it to the worldly way of thinking. No. Let us not do this. Let us stick fast to the fathers and conform the scientific knowledge into the traditions which we have received. Because this is truly from the giver, the God who knows all things, who created all things, who knows all things. So from him we have a true source of what is right, what happened. And so we trust in him. Even if the simplistic understanding of what he teaches is much more subtle, much more nuanced than what we think he says, nevertheless we trust him that what he said is correct. And even if it's more nuanced, we see it's correct in the nuance. So just as a mind, that we don't get caught up with the so-called titles and authorities and worldly knowledge and subordinate our faith to this, as if we're having to submit the gospel of Christ to the ways of the world to please man. No. So if anyone sort of tries to come up and sort of use this to attack the Christian faith, we take it with a great pinch of salt. No. The faith has been tried by many saints over and over and over again. And so we know our faith, we know the strength of our faith, we know the truth of our faith, we know that God exists. We know him to be the creator of all things. We confess him to be a creator and in charge. So let us first put him forth. And if there's certain questions we say, I don't know how to explain this, that is fine. But let's not just quickly rush off to say, oh no, we must confirm this. Because if I've seen people try to do this, and they introduce more and more heresies. They actually misunderstand God's relation to man. They create impossible stories of how creation got here and things. They make God the author of death. They make all sorts of theological problems and blasphemies and trying to squeeze the Christian way into the way of the world. So let's be very, very careful. Yes, sometimes we might just say, I don't know. Sometimes I'm not sure how to reconcile this. That is fine. And some of the things that maybe that's correct. The greater mysteries than we expect. So let's not necessarily push it away, but let's distinguish too between the evidence that they see, what they experience and the experiments, etc., and the story of how that evidence fits into the bigger picture. The story of their mathematical equations and stuff which says this and this should happen. Now, mathematics, due to a world being created by reason, is actually a proof that God is created by reason. And he has created an order. So we should be able to find an order to the relation. We should be able to start making mathematical equations and use the mathematical equations to send a rocket to the moon. That's fine. That shows that God is a creator. He has put things in order. He is created by reason. And we can use and participate in that reason to do certain things. But let us be careful that we think our reason or our mathematics describes everything perfectly. No, God's puts quite a few curveballs in there to make things a lot more difficult than we think. So it's not simplistic human mind. It's actually much more complicated. So there is a relationship where we can do science, where we can see regular patterns, etc. That works because God creates by reason, as I said. He creates an order. But we also see that material things are inherently disordered. That's why you have all the quantum things are all random, etc. This is a chaos of matter left to itself of itself. And this is theologically correct. And so there's some weird and wonderful things that go on, which actually are theologically correct. But let's be careful not to be caught by these things to be diluted into technologies and to save us. And we can use this to explain the mysteries of free will and the mysteries of... No, let us stick to the scriptures. Let us stick to the things we're taught by the Holy Fathers. Let us follow this. Because we are inspired by God. These things come from who created us. So even if we seem a little bit silly to these great mathematicians, these great philosophers, we're not really. Because we know that the source of what is there. But just be careful when you're speaking, not that you haven't got a simplistic idea of our Christian faith, because that is not good either. And so it's better to say, I'm not sure and stuff, but certainly we must not deny that God is creator of heaven and earth and the sustainer of all things and knows all things. So let us keep our faith in Him. He will be shown to be true. because we know he's true for many, many other reasons of our spiritual life, our practice, the testimonies of the saints. So he's also true in these things. So let us hold fast to this. And yes, some things may seem extremely, well, how do we explain that? That's fine. But the explanation is only a story. And when we put all the pieces together and then add God, you might find that the story is very well explained by God. The secular people are only making the story without God. How can you have a proper story of reality, of existence, when you cut out the source of reality, the source of existence? The stories are always going to be distorted, trying to meet their understanding, their faith. That's why they are thinking about it. So we must be very careful with these scientific theories and ideas. That they now, not to say that they're not trying to truly make a correct story on the evidence they've seen and trying to put it together, but the evidence is, how can it be proper when they cut out God, the creator stuff? They just use human observations and stuff. This is a fallen world. Things are not working as exactly as they were. Things have changed since the creation, since the fall, since all sorts of things. The system is not as it was in the beginning. So we must be very careful not to get caught up and deduce things too much. But yes, the world is like God. It's a little bit more complicated than we think in a simplistic way. So let us, and some of the science is definitely interesting, but let's be careful to distinguish between the observations, the tests, etc., which we should accept as being true, but even then, some of them might be a little bit demonic. You never know some of these things, so you've got to always pinch of salt. And that's why we stick to the revelation. We stick to what God has told us, what the fathers have passed on to us, and we try to incorporate as reasonably we can the evidence that is given to us, but everything, as I said, with a pinch of salt. So let's just be careful of these things. Never subordinate our divine revelation, our heritage and the tradition of the fathers to secular thinking, because we don't know its source, we don't know exactly all that's behind it, and most of it's limited to their little bubble of materialistic thinking or something like this, and they're not really taking into account everything that's there. And I think there's certain problems that are hitting which shows that this doesn't actually work, and so let us be careful on those points. So that's what I wanted to say, is not to get caught up in technologies, human thoughts, ideas, philosophies, etc., because these could be from the evil one, or they are just simply a product of a limited human experience and imagination, or the deliberate cutting out of God. Therefore, they will be distorted. Well, having asked how to avoid getting caught up in the deceit of these things, I think primarily, what is our focus? We should be focusing on the scriptures. We should be focusing on the writings of the Holy Fathers. So let us be careful not to read too much of these other things. Let us get not caught up in sort of studying these things. So let us primarily put our thoughts, our reading and our prayer into the reading of the Holy Fathers. Let us be strong in the theology of the church, the teaching of the saints, and then we see these other things, we read them in the context of this theology. Now, for the sake of the younger ones, for children, it's a little harder because they go to school and they get these secular things on there. Again, we should be trying to bring up our children in the knowledge of the scriptures, in the knowledge of the things. So we should make sure we teach them, and they should be brought to church, etc., so that they learn the Christian things. So they have a way of balancing this. You may need to speak with your children and not to necessarily say that the knowledge is rubbish, and because the child won't accept. They want to accept but just to say, be careful, child. This knowledge is from secular people who speak about God. Much of it is true. Affirm that some of the stuff is correct, because, as a matter of fact, it does actually work. The mathematics that we use to go to the moon, it does work. The chemistry, we can make chemicals, it does work. Some of the genetics, they can make it do things. So we mustn't sort of just rubbish it in this sense, but we must just say we're careful not to get too caught up with this. You must always put the priority of our faith. We must understand it in the context of our faith and prioritize the love of God, the teaching of God, the teaching of the fathers. This is the most important thing. And if a child is caught up in secular thinking, this gets a bit more difficult. And sometimes we've got to wait until the child is willing to open up to understanding and believing in God. If they're not, it's very, very difficult to do much here. Though you can do some things like videos and stuff, and there's comments that sort of question some of the theology, and we can expose them to some of the people asking questions and challenging that and putting those things forward. So, but on the level of more of a scientist, so there's certain scientists who will go, hold a minute, how does this work and stuff, and even the top scientists, there'll be debates among themselves. So just to show them, to expose them to that, people whom they can understand, to see that there is not an absolute surety of understanding, and that this is all from on high, and you can explain how things once changed from this to this. So affirm what is good and what is said, otherwise you're going to end up just an impossible fight. Prioritize the Christian teaching, the Christian message, that all things must be interpreted in the sight of Christianity. And if they're not open to that, then just share them with the questions, but don't necessarily push against it. Just do enough to people questioning that they too might start to learn to question. Just something there you can show, oh look, this is changing there. Just so that the person starts to get to able to question the situation. Recently, my cousin was an atheist, a materialist, and he started to ask questions about these things, and he's changing. He's seen the emptiness of this way of thinking. So be patient. He's in his 50s now by the time this happens. So it doesn't necessarily come quickly, but just a way to keep them questioning and stuff like that. But in a subtle way, but not like imposing this is, you must believe this way, but just giving a little bit of argument to space. Hey, hold a minute, what about this? What about this? What about this? To just keep them in the process of thinking, so they don't get trapped that this is the only way to think. That's the thing. If you can keep their minds moving, they keep questioning, moving beyond, that is good. And those who have faith, obviously reinforce. You must put the scriptures first, must put God first, must put our tradition first. This is from God, and we must understand everything in this context. So they have a priority of thinking of God and seeing things in that way, and that will help protect us from being caught up with these delusions. But ultimately, we must keep our own spiritual life. Follow the fathers, the way of prayer, the way of reading the scriptures, the way of reading the fathers. Let us prioritize this, and then we should be safe. But if we lose ourselves into all this science, we open ourselves to deception, as the old days of the heretics. You let them read all their literature and stuff. Not that we wanted to control freedom, but there's a sense of, look, this is not wise to be doing this. So there's lots of hooks and stuff which can delude people. It sounds good. It's all drips of honey, and yet it's poison underneath. So, but try not to force anybody. You just leave them with their freedom. Leave them to explore. We're not afraid of the truth. We're not afraid of studying, but just help them to start questioning things so that they don't trapped. This is very helpful. Just you keeping them open, keeping them seeking the truth, and not letting them get narrow-minded. And hopefully, if they have an open heart and stuff, and their freedom, they will come to accept the truth. But not all will. And sometimes there's not much. We can't force anybody into heaven. We can't remove all temptations for people. So we just otherwise just praying that God will help them. Right, well, then the question about miracles. As we said in the Christian faith, God is the creator of all. But he's not some sort of what's called deist. He sort of creates and just forgets the world and separates. No, he sustains the world. We are sustained by his will, by his power. And as a matter of fact, we can't exist apart from God, apart from his keeping us in existence. Why is this important? Well, the order in the universe is that given by God. The regular patterns of things that we see is established by God. Now, he allows the world to run in a certain regular order, in a certain way, but he is Lord of the world, and occasionally, if he so desires, he is quite free to manipulate the material, manipulate the things that happen to his greater ends. So in general, he keeps it in a stable situation because it's better. He's not a God of arbitrariness. He's not a God who just, oh, suddenly it's going to be light. No, sorry, world, we're going to make it dark for the next six years. Oh, no, we'll make it light again. Oh, make it hot. No. He's not a God of arbitrary whim like this. He's a God of reason. He's a God of stability. He's a God of order. So when he creates things in order. Things have a certain order. Now, we live in a fallen world. So the order, because God has removed himself from perfectly sustaining our world, collapses. It falls into chaos. It falls into disorder. It falls into death. It falls into corruption. That's why when we build houses, they start falling apart again. Things grow and then die. We build a fence and it slowly starts to decay. We have to keep constantly working to maintain things. Again, that's a bit like behaving like God. We have to sustain the world, because without God, the world is not sustained. So he allows us to, in our creation, to have to sustain things because they fall apart. So in a sense, we are working little miracles. When the building's falling down, which is its natural thing, we intervene and we correct the building and fix it up again. We create buildings out of nothing. How did that happen? It's a little because we are free creatures with power to modify the world. And we can take the resources. We can fix atoms. We can do all sorts of things. We're like little gods. And so God as a whole is overlooking all of creation. He holds it in his hand. Everything works because he desires it. And so he's able to, in there, if someone's got a broken leg, he can fix it. He can change atoms. He can work through all the material in there and restore it, because all is under his control. All is in his creation. So he will do this if he has a need for this. Not just arbitrarily at a whim. He does it because someone needs to be healed. And it's for faith. He doesn't heal everybody and stuff, because the point is, again, it's not about being perfectly embodied in this life. He wants us to get to heaven. So it's not, everything is done according to his discretion, his knowledge. Sometimes he will, for somebody, a miracle is helpful. He will change the way it works for that specific person. But when I say change the way, it's the order is what by him. He is the Lord of the order. It's his order, and if he wishes to modify it for someone else, he's free to do so. He's not bound by the order which he's there. He is free of his world. He can do in it as he wishes. And so we go, oh no, God, you can't do that because that changes the order which you imposed in the world. That'd be silly. But he doesn't do that, as I said, because he's not arbitrary. He keeps it in order. And so when he does things, he does it for a purpose, for a reason, for our benefit. And the benefit is always our eternal salvation. That is what he's created us, is eternally to exist with him. There's no point for him. There's no interest to just do things on earth for the sake of our earthly enjoyment and stuff. Occasionally, for love of somebody, he does something because it's helpful for them, and out of his love and compassion for us. But this is a gift. We can't expect this to happen. There's no need for God to do this. So miracles are not the sort of thing we see all the time. However, in another way, miracles are happening all the time. When we have the Holy Eucharist, the miracles happening every Sunday. Our body, the bread and blood of changing to the body and blood of Christ. Not that we can see this in a physical way, but we can taste it spiritually when we partake of these things. It's not like eating ordinary bread and wine. We notice the effect on our soul and our heart when we partake of this. This is not like an ordinary meal. So we perceive the change in there, the miracle that happens. So in these ways, miracles are happening all the time. And as I say, there's all sorts of things like little miracles. God's providence always works with us. But so, yes, the miracles are, in a sense, a part of God's providence sustaining of the world which he created and which he ordered. And he's quite free to do that. So this is not something like, oh, this is impossible. No, we should be expecting to see this. But also we should expect to be not seeing it all the time in an arbitrary manner. It should be in a certain time and place, because God is a God of reason, a God of order. He's not a God of chaos. He's not a God of arbitrariness. No. So that would be contrary to his character to see these things. And as always, we must remember that the purpose is not this world in itself, but eternal life in the manifestation. So, and we have many records of miracles through that, completely what we expect to see, but also we don't expect, as I said, to see them every 5 seconds or so. That God would be sort of denying his own character if that was the case. So, yes, these are not sort of things imposed contrary to the way the world is. Actually, it's almost part of the fabric of the way the world exists, is God maintaining it, sustaining it through his will. And these things are just specific times where he's acted in a specific manner to help us in a specific need in this world, which sometimes is a little bit different from the standard order or standard fallen order as well. It's almost pointing towards the good of his creation, that he's restoring the order that it was intended before the fall. So he's correcting a disorder in creation rather than changing the order. Many times he's corrected a disorder that has come into creation. This is another way of thinking of it. Because he's stepped out of creation, it's fallen into chaos. When he does a miracle, often he's actually not going contrary to the creation or the order of creation. He's restoring his initial desire and order of creation. So let's be careful in this way as well, that we are in a fallen, disordered world. It maintains a large degree of order, but it is falling into disorder, and that's the result of the fall. So anyway, there we go. It's a little